Hello everyone, I am Yugank Goyal, faculty member here at Flame University. Recently at the campus we hosted Dr. Balasubramaniam and Mr. Hemang Jani from Capacity Building Commission. Capacity Building Commission is one of the recently established commissions by the Government of India under Mission Karmyogi with a mandate to reform the civil services and public administration of India. It's an extremely important commission. Dr. Balasubramaniam is a widely respected development expert. He's a public policy analyst, leadership trainer and an author. He spent several decades living and working amongst forest tribal communities, particularly in Karnataka near Mysuru. He's also founded the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement, which is a development organization, and also the grassroots research and advocacy movement. It's a very famous public policy think tank called GRAM. He's currently a visiting professor at Cornell University as well as IIT Delhi. And in addition to coaching and mentoring various people in non-profits and corporates, he also engages extensively with the government. He's also an acclaimed author. In fact, his books, I the Citizen, Voices from Grassroots, Leadership Lessons for Daily Living, they're globally acclaimed. He pursued his MBBS, after which an MPhil in Hospital Administration and Health Systems, and later on went to Kennedy School of Government to do his Masters in Public Administration. Mr. Jani is also a very widely experienced and respected professional in public policy governance and, more importantly, innovation systems. For almost 2 decades, he has been working towards improving public service delivery through technology, designing all kinds of innovation frameworks, applying different kinds of technology in order to adopt innovation in governance. He has helped private sector development take place both at the central as well as the state level, even international level for that matter. Before he joined as a secretary in the Capacity Building Commission, he was working as the senior private sector specialist in the World Bank headquarters in Washington, D.C. Earlier, he was also working with the Government of India as the officer on special duty on knowledge and innovation space in the Prime Minister's office. Before moving to the development sector, Mr. Jani has spent several years with leading consulting firms as well. Both Mr. Jani and Dr. Balasubramaniam, they spent the whole day recently in the campus talking to our faculty members, students, and many members of the staff in order to discuss various ideas of collaboration. Flame University is proud to set up an MOU on research and training purposes with the Capacity Building Commission. In addition to engaging with various people here in the campus, we were also lucky to find some time to take their interviews, to engage with them and discuss questions on public administration and civil services reforms. Here are some of the ideas that were discussed. Dr. Balu, Mr. Jani, such a pleasure to have you here. Very briefly, tell us about Mission Karmayogi.
I think Mission Karmayogi is essentially a program of the Government of India to build the capacities of civil servants in order to make them future ready, in order to ensure that they embark on the journey of lifelong learning, and in order to understand that they are part of a larger construct called Team India, where they're all working towards building a new India, vision of a new India that the Prime Minister keeps talking and telling us about, and also shift their thinking from a very the usual rule-based approaches that the system is used to understanding that their role is to build a great country. And how do you contribute to this, the shift in the Mission Karmayogi is looking about the shift from a rule-based to a role-based approach, but everything from the perspective of citizens, because finally all this state exists for citizens. So how do you get in that citizen-centric perspective? So this is a vision of the Prime Minister in ensuring that along with economic growth of this country, those benefits of economic growth reaches out to every citizen through a civil service which is very responsive, which is very responsible, and also constantly upgrading itself to deliver to the different kinds of demands that citizens make on the system.
Wonderful. You mentioned about the mindset of the bureaucracy of the administration. So let me ask you this, and this is a question that comes very often, which is that is there a bureaucratic mindset different from a mindset of a professional otherwise? And do you think this mindset is changing over the last few decades? The type of civil servants and public administrators who enter the service today, are they different from the type of people who entered earlier? And do you think over these years the citizens' trust in bureaucracy has gone up, gone down? There's a lot to unpack here, but
see, I think it's not just the mindset of the bureaucrat. I think there are two ways of looking at this. One, I would say the inside out, the bureaucrat and his understanding of the system and how he responds to it. The other approach I would call the outside in, how the system looks at the bureaucrat and the kind of pressures it puts on the person, right? And to understand this, you must understand our nation's progress over the last 75 years. See, when we got our freedom, we inherited a bureaucracy which was to keep our people in control. So the thinking of the civil services was, how do you regulate the masses to fall in line? How do you deliver not to citizens but to subjects of a sort of a benign crown, if you can call it that. So the civil services were trained to be providers, because that is exactly, or to be regulators first. And when we got our freedom, the country was in such a state that the system had to provide for its citizens. So civil services were geared to provide. But we evolved as a nation and we crossed that stage, and in the 90s when we started privatizing, globalizing and joining the global space, I think our system realized that we need to now provision, and so we moved away from a provider to provisioner, and that's a great shift in skill set requirement. But today, if you look at all our programs, whether it's the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan or every program, even the COVID vaccination program, the Prime Minister talks of Jan Bhagidari, or which is possibly the highest expression of democracy in a framework in which citizens participate. So we are looking at partnerships now. So how does the state transform itself from being a provider mindset to a provisioning mindset to a partnering mindset? It's a huge shift, right? But this shift also means citizens have to evolve and grow. Citizens can't see the state as just a provider of welfare. Citizens have to see the state as partners in their own progress. So it's a maturation on both sides. So I think bureaucracy is evolving. Citizens are making complex demands. Bureaucracy is under tremendous pressure, because today this kind of accountability framework that is demanded of them, the kind of oversight of social media on them, the kind of self-made pressure some of the bureaucrats indulge in, like they sort of tweet the moment they go visit a village now. Correct. Like we have all kinds of things that is either self-created or the system created on them. So I think bureaucracy will shift, that's normal. But is it shifting for the better? I think the last few years is seeing them do that. They're becoming more understanding, they're becoming more understanding of the demands of partnership, and I think it's a very pleasant and healthy change that has begun.
No, I think, see, if we look at it from another lens, bureaucracy is a system, is an institution, and civil servant is the person. And we often end up attaching the inefficiencies of the system to the person. And Mission Karmayogi is all about enabling the person and empowering the civil servant in delivering the public services. In Gita, chapter 3, Adhyaya 3 of Karmayogi talks about action. And that is what the essence of Mission Karmayogi is. How do you enable action of civil servant with right knowledge, skills and attitude to deliver the public services? And bureaucracy is about the creating enabling environment, about the creating enabling system for the bureaucrat or the civil servant, as we should call it, to perform better in delivering these services.
Now, this is great, and I think this also, Dr. Balu, this also chimes in well with the rule-based approach to role-based, because the more you move from provision to partner, then you also move from rule to role, right? In partnership, the roles become important. So that's great. But one of the things that you mentioned about the demands, the complex demand that bureaucracy is now facing from the people, and Mr. Jani, you mentioned about the empowerment of civil servants. So here's an interesting question that often comes up in this context, these two contexts that you've just mentioned, which is that are these civil servants supposed to be experts in the field, and is that empowerment more important? Is going to be more meaningful if they are experts in a field, or for that matter, their demands could be better met if they are experts in what they are governing, or they should be generalists. So in general, the Indian bureaucracy is considered to be a generalist administrator's viewpoint, right? But then there is another view, which is that health should be taken care of by someone who's expert in health, and education should be taken care of by someone in education. But we keep seeing these transfers of public administrators. Somebody who's doing something in oil industry is then moved to health, who's then moved to tax, and so on and so forth. So do you think there is a need for bureaucracy to become more expert oriented, so to speak, or there is a value, because both brings their own values? And what are your views on this?
See, I think if I can look at the subject, there is a lot of debate going on about specialist versus generalist. But we have to look at it very carefully. If you look at, you run a business school here at Flame University. If you look at some of the top global business schools, Do you prepare a CEO for a particular industry in your school, or do you prepare a CEO with the characteristics to become a CEO? Right? The person acquires specialization on the job, and then they become specialists. So it is not about, debate is not about do we need specialists. Definitely we need specialists. World is changing, the technology is even changing world even faster than we can imagine. So we definitely need specialists in different parts, different jobs. But the question is, how do we create those specialists? That is what the concept of lateral entry, concept of creating enabling environment, concept of training civil servants through right skills, attitude and exposure comes. And that is what I think we should understand. How do we look at it? We look at it creating an environment where every civil servant can upgrade themselves continuously. Currently their capacity building and their training is very episodic. So how do we enable that process to happen continuously and to keep the pace with the changing times and the changing pace of the world and the challenges? That is what I think I would look at specialization and generalization debate.
You know, just to add to what Hemang said, this debate is eternal. But then we also sort of sweepingly call the entire bureaucracy modeling around what we understand of the IAS. Typically, the IAS is seen as a generalist. But if you look at it, you look at the policing. Policing is a specialized job. So they are IPS officers. If you look at taxation and taxation responsibilities, the IRS is a specialized job. Or if you look at railways, so we have actually a hybrid model in India already existing.
This is some sort of a narrative in a way.
Yeah, it's a narrative, but it's not a wrong narrative also, because these are people whom the citizens see, so they make an opinion. But even amongst them, I see value in the first few years. The way, see, today we celebrate around the world an approach of ecosystem approach. We talk of systems thinking. Now, how do you get to understand the societal framework? How do you understand societal systems? Now, these administrators, from the time they join into the service, the initial 10 to 15 years, they are generalists and they're exposed to virtually societal problems at a very large general scale. So my view would be, as they progress in their careers, they should possibly, we should create spaces for learning to be a specialist. We should also create opportunities for them to express that learning, the special jobs that they can deliver on. And many of them, the system has actually bred this in its own way, though there's no formalization. I know several officers who are extremely good in urban governance and urban development. Somehow they grow in the job, the authorities recognize it, and somehow they flourish in whatever they are good at. Some people get into finance and they get very deep into finance and financial matters. Some people get into health and they grow in health sector. Well, is it the norm? It is not the norm. But how do we capitalize on enabling the general understanding of society and systems, the initial stages of careers, and then the complex demands of the world today is you need specialists for everything. But the other way we can bring specialization is also that you can have general administrators, you can also have lateral entry of specialists, and that's what the government is trying out now, right? People with backgrounds in special areas, like this, and development is so fast, there is no one person who can get everything given. Technologies and emerging technologies are changing the landscape so much that it's going to be, everybody has to learn to be something every time, right? And I mean, all of us are subject to great learning. That is where I think Mission Karmayogi is really unique, is it wants to enable lifelong learning in a ratio which actually allows it to happen. Like 70% of learning we recognize is experiential. It happens on the job, along with the job. Then you seek out information and grow it. 20% is relational learning is what we call. And so you relate to people who are good at the subject, you reach out to them, you constantly acquire knowledge. You can't keep knowing everything. So you reach out to people who know it and bring that into the system. Ideally, only 10% is informational learning. And so we are looking at how do you embed all this into the system, where a generalist can evolve into a specialist, or a specialist can be a specialist of general things. You can be a specialized generalist, as well as a generalist evolving into a specialist. So I think these are challenges for every country, because at today's times they're so complex, and India is going through the same challenges, and at least we have an institutional mechanism to find a solution. And that's what the Capacity Building Commission is all about.
This is very interesting, because in terms of the lifelong learning and these elements that you brought forward, it looks like to me that I don't know the curricular structure, the learning methods, the processes in Labasna or every state, they have their own training institutions. There are hundreds of training institutions at the ground level, at the lowest level. All of their curricular structure or pedagogies, they will need a rehaul perhaps, right? And I think, so I'm trying to figure out, so is there a role that universities can play in engaging with Capacity Building Commission in training our public administrators and create some sort of inspiration for lifelong learning the way that you've just mentioned? Because because it looks like to me, you're right, if there is something that they learn, the world will change so fast that they will now again need to learn something else. So this, and I'm aware that Capacity Building Commission is mandated with the idea of lifelong learning for bureaucrats and civil servants. There is a role for universities that you see in these type of programs. What are the thoughts that CBC has in engaging with these ideas?
So I think the skill sets that's required for a public administrator today transcends the traditional understanding of government itself. And today governance itself is no longer limited to the public sector. It's a demand of, it's sort of a synergistic partnership that emerges between the public sector, private sector, civil society, academic institutions, media, the complex multiple stakeholders in this game. And appreciating all this requires a new way of looking at it. So I would definitely say there's no institution that can have this kind of knowledge. And one hopes that universities will be the breeding grounds of this thinking and knowledge. But let's not generalize. I wouldn't say all universities in India are the same. Most universities are fossilized in our country too. But some of them are brilliant, and that is exactly what the Capacity Building Commission is doing. We are identifying good universities that we can partner with, like we're partnering with Flame University. People, they don't have to be good in everything. Well, we need 100 things. One or two universities might have A and B, some other university may have D and E, and something else may have Z and something else. So we are doing our due diligence, identifying good universities who have the knowledge base to provide us the support, and an aggregated partnership that we do across the nation would definitely do it. So as much as the government is seeking out universities, I think universities also have to up their act and have to be relevant and modern. They have to also understand that for several universities, industry partnership is not just the actual industry, but public sector is the industry by itself, and reaching out and understanding public problems, public challenges, societal issues. So as universities mature and evolve into bodies who are concerned about society and outgrow this nature of just being academic, so I think this mixture of academia and practitioner, the right mix for society, is what the Commission hopes to enable through partnerships. So it's a two-way process. As much as we are looking for good universities to partner with, universities have to be good enough to be partnered with also. And that's how I would look at it.
And also, see, universities also have to evolve because the education system itself is evolving. The way universities used to look at the curriculum and look at the programs, a 1-year program or a 2-year program, is changing. Your app has become university. You have your Google is your university right now, right? So we are also looking at creating a lot of online learning opportunities, because the scale at which the civil services need constant knowledge upgradation. 3.1 million civil servants, if they need constantly every month, every year something, it has to be a participative approach from everywhere. And universities, there is a lot of scope for them, but at the Commission, we are promoting a lot of online and phygital learning, because we can't serve this much through only physical learning. So universities also have to create capabilities to create online learning opportunities, create say blended courses, create blended learning opportunities. And another aspect which we often ignore in India is the research on public administration. That is where universities can participate the most. By doing lot of research insight, by generating lot of analytics, lot of research insights on public administration and on issues related to public policy itself.
Wonderful. Let me switch the gear and ask you something which has been, something that comes up in my classes and many conversations. So Indian state and Indian government or public administrators are absolutely brilliant in delivering certain type of solutions. COVID vaccination, for instance, is one good example. We eradicated polio and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, there are some issues that we have simply not been able to solve in the same way that we have solved the others, right? So poverty or malnutrition is, for instance, something that we are still grappling with. Why is it that Indian public administrators and the state is so good in certain type of things, but not so good in the other type of things when the same people who are doing this. And we don't have an answer to this, but love to hear your thoughts about this. There has been some research on this, and some people talk about the state capacity, some people talk about levels of the state, whether the local levels work better or the central level works better. But this is an interesting contrast that we find in India.
See, I think the complexity is not just in state capacity. Complexity is also in state structure. Like all of us in the space of management, we talk about functions. Once you understand the functions the organization is supposed to deliver on, you build a structure around it. Everything that you mentioned are complex functions that citizens need. But in our country, constitutionally, we have divided those functions across different structures, right from a panchayat to a urban local body to a state to a national body. Now, there are regional forces, there are linguistic forces, there are complexities of societal fabric, of caste, etc. Those are real. Now, amidst these problems, what are those problems which affect everybody's life, right? And what are those that the national level convening power exists? Now, and we as a country have been extremely good in responding to crises.
Yes.
Like if you look at disaster management, we are possibly one of the world's best disaster response institutions created in this country. And that's real because we have become so good at it. Or if you look at airport security, right? So wherever you had one single functional responsibility vested in one structure, people have excelled. But when you break it down across several structures, the complexity of convening is such a challenge. So it's not about state capacity alone, it's also about state capacity getting disseminated across several structural frameworks which you don't have convening power over. It's a very complex process. So it's very easy to generalize, but I think COVID, for example, though health is a state subject, but if you look at the way COVID response happened, I think it was a brilliant example of the national government taking responsibility for it, pushing for it, paying for it, and enabling and facilitating the entire country and giving credit to everybody, which is unlike other situations, right? And therefore, we could, even citizens were given credit. Like the entire vaccination program, Prime Minister said, citizens participated, and that's true. They came forward and took our vaccinations. The state participated, corporate sector participated, private sector participated. So I think that facilitation was what enabled that success. Whereas poverty is a generational issue. Poverty is a development challenge which has handled at several layers, from the panchayat to the urban local body to the state, the district. There's so many layers for it to be managed. At best, the national government is just writes the check in many cases, right? Or designs a program and delivers it. But very rarely can you get an opportunity like NREGS, where it became a national act as a response to pressure from citizens, and then the system responded, and we have made it better and better every year. But that is a solution which are very rare. So I think we need to be very clear. The problems are complex. The structural frameworks to respond to these problems are fragmented, and then we want unified responses to solve it. So I think malnutrition is a generational problem. And the Women and Child Department has got a brilliant program now called Poshan 2. But if the convergence that is demanded of it is not brought forward, like we brought it for COVID, it will be a problem we'll keep fighting for a long time. So some problems have to be unified into one structure as a response. Possibly the response can be faster. I think these are all lessons we're all learning all the time. But embedding this ability to collaborate, if you look at Mission Karmayogi, one of the mandates of the Commission is also de-siloization. I think maybe the concept of de-siloization emerged looking at how do you build these structural responses beyond silos and fiefdoms that you see that's the way organizations evolve. And governments also evolved to protect their own fiefdoms. And now when you try to respond in a way in which all these boundaries become blurred and dissolved, you need special skills, and that's what we are trying to do.
Let me just add one line to it. See, continuous performance will also require continuous capacity building. And that is what we are trying to enable. You have episodic capacity building, you have episodic performance and episodic results right now. From there, how do we convert it into an ongoing, continuous learning and continuous capacity building, translating into continuous performance and higher performance every time. I think this is the essence of Mission Karma.
I think this is interesting because successful experiments have had episodic success or exits. But speaking of continuity, I think probably the last question, we often think that public administration in India is something that we inherited from the British Raj, and this is what's continuing. But surely there must have been a continuous process of public administration built into the civilizational ethos of India. We wouldn't have had these large empires of Mauryas or Cholas if there was no strong public administration systems within the country. So I think, is there a thinking going in the direction of unlocking, unpacking, or evolving, or identifying and institutionalizing the Indian civilizational ethos in public administration, which is different from how administration is done probably in other parts? Because I think administration is also culturally, sort of culturally inspired or enriched in some ways. Even though the general narrative is this is post-independence administration, Indians have been administrating large amount of, the subcontinent's rulers have been doing massive things over last 2,000-3,000 years, 5,000 years actually. If you look at the civilizational narrative since Indus Valley, is there some inspiration or thought that is tied in from the civilizational ethos that India has?
If you look at the government notification announcing the creation of the Capacity Building Commission, there's two words which particularly it caught my attention. It says that will be driven by the civilizational ethos of India. And I think in that is a clear indication of the system that there's so much to learn. I think a nation which refuses to learn from its past can never build its future. That's my view. And we've had a lot of strength. I think let's look at it. How do you measure public administration and its success? It's not just from citizens and their life and their lifestyles and their living conditions. It's also about economic growth facilitating social development, social progress, enabling economic development. It's a constant tension between these elements. And if you look at India from recorded history, from if it says 0 AD to 1600 AD, we were the world's consistent growing economies. Yeah. Close to 38% of the global GDP came from India. We couldn't have grown for 1600 continuous years, which no other country has grown, without a public administration being provided to its citizens and the nation at large, despite being thousands of kingdoms, in a consistent way. That is proof enough to show that public administration was alive and well. When this was distorted through colonization and the consequences we saw, by the time we got our independence, our share of the global GDP was less than 2%. Right? Now we are again recovering. So my view is, there are lessons to learn, and at the commission, Hemang will share more thoughts on that, is how are we learning from these. I'm not romanticizing the past and saying everything in the past is great, but let's look at what worked for us, how it worked, why it worked, what are the lessons that can be learned, and in an evidential way, what portions of it can be embedded into the system. And if there's something which can make us more responsive, in a highly complex, fragmented, kingdom-wise kind of an approach that this country existed, there's still something unifying us. And if you can discover that mantra and you can re-embed it in our collective administrative consciousness today, I think we would have cracked the code.
I think, see, our Honorable Prime Minister has beautifully described this, that when the civil servants start thinking about their work as not a job, but as service, seva, that itself is the change in the ethos. In our ancient ethos, Raja had created a lot of sevaks for Praja, right? That is one. Second, what can we learn from past? Many things which we have already started learning and we have indirectly started doing. In ancient times, local problems had local solutions. So if you look at our Panchayati Raj institutions and our devolution, it is also trying to empower, and in recent times even there is further more empowerment at the local level, that how do we create local level participation to solve the local level problems, how do we create local level growth centers, one district, one product kind of schemes and one kind of programs. They are in that direction to enable it. That is another aspect. And the third aspect is, you also have to create that opportunity in a civil servant to work at local level and solve at local level, right? Everything can't go at the top and then only get solved. So how do you create that enabling environment and that culture? And at Commission, we are also trying to trace the history of public administration. Every village, every town you go, you will find a Shilalekh, and you will find a folklore or a story related to it, that this Raja was here and he used to rule like this, or he used to create this kind of opportunities for Praja. We are trying to trace all of this and trying to learn that and put it in the present day context. and those are some of the valuable lessons we are going to put on our portal as well. Let's see what we find there.
No, it's great. In fact, such a delight to hear both of you, and pleasure to host you here at campus. Frankly, I feel very reassured and sort of refreshing conversation that we've had through the day and of course now. I wish you all the best, and if there is anything that Flame University can do for the commission, please consider us at your disposal. It's a great message for us.
Thank you.
So
It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful to see all the good work that's happening.